the same time, Jimmy Page is one of the best guitar players I've ever known, and Bonham was a hell of a powerhouse.
Keith Richards stands as one of the most influential figures in rock and roll history. As the guitarist for the Rolling Stones, he has spent more than 60 years creating some of the most memorable guitar riffs ever recorded. His contributions to music have shaped the sound of rock for multiple generations, and his distinctive playing style has become instantly recognizable to millions of fans around the world. However, Keith Richards was never just a talented musician. He also earned a reputation as one of the most outspoken and honest figures in the music industry. When Keith disliked another guitarist or disagreed with their approach to music, he never kept those feelings to himself. He spoke his mind freely, without concern for diplomacy or politics. His opinions were raw, unfiltered, and often controversial. Keith's musical philosophy was straightforward and uncompromising. He believed that feeling mattered more than technical flash, that soul was more important than any amount of gymnastics on the fretboard. According to Keith, the heart of great guitar playing came from emotion and authenticity, not from showing off or displaying technical prowess. Any guitarist who forgot this fundamental truth, in Keith's view, had lost their way. His standards were high, and his criticism of those who didn't meet them was often harsh and public. The list of guitarists Keith allegedly had problems with is surprisingly long and includes some of the biggest names in rock music. These weren't just casual disagreements or minor differences of opinion. According to various sources, these were serious conflicts that represented fundamental disagreements about what guitar playing should be and what rock music was supposed to accomplish. Eddie Van Halen, the revolutionary guitarist known for popularizing the two-handed tapping technique, allegedly drew Keith's disapproval. Keith reportedly viewed Eddie's innovative playing style as nothing more than flashy tricks without genuine soul or blues feeling. Sources claimed that Keith dismissed Eddie's famous tapping technique as a circus trick designed to impress teenagers rather than communicate real emotion through the instrument. Keith allegedly believed that true guitarists didn't need gimmicks or special effects to express themselves. They could convey everything they needed to say through straightforward, honest playing. The story goes that Keith actually walked out of a Van Halen concert during the early 1980s. People who were there claimed that Keith told his crew the show gave him a headache. He reportedly couldn't stand all the jumping around and technical displays happening on stage. For Keith, this represented everything wrong with where guitar playing was heading. He allegedly believed that Eddie Van Halen's influence on younger guitarists was harmful because it encouraged them to focus on speed and technical tricks instead of learning proper blues phrasing and developing a sense of rhythm. Industry insiders reported that Keith turned down opportunities to work with Eddie because the gap between their musical philosophies was simply too wide to bridge. Yngwie Malmsteen, the Swedish guitarist famous for his neoclassical metal style and lightning-fast playing, also allegedly earned Keith's contempt. Keith reportedly described Yngwie's playing as pointless and self-indulgent, claiming he played millions of notes that communicated absolutely nothing to listeners. Keith allegedly believed that speed without soul was just noise, and that Yngwie represented everything that had gone wrong with modern guitar culture. There's a story that Keith heard Yngwie's music playing at a party and immediately demanded that someone turn it off. He reportedly said it sounded like someone practicing their scales at triple speed rather than playing actual songs with meaning. According to sources, Keith believed that Yngwie had forgotten the fundamental purpose of the guitar, which was to make people move and feel something. He allegedly told interviewers that technical ability meant nothing if audiences couldn't connect emotionally with the music they were hearing. Supposedly, Keith referred to neoclassical metal as homework music that only impressed other guitarists, rather than reaching regular listeners. His alleged contempt for this style of playing was total and never wavered. Steve Vai, known for his technical mastery and impossibly complex compositions, allegedly represented everything Keith thought was pretentious and overthought about modern guitar playing. Keith reportedly called Steve's music mathematics rather than rock and roll. Sources claim that Keith believed Steve's perfect technique and complicated time signatures stripped away all the human imperfection that made blues and rock music beautiful and relatable. When allegedly asked to comment on Steve's instrumental albums, Keith supposedly responded that he would rather listen to silence than computer-generated guitar exercises pretending to have emotions. Keith allegedly told friends that Steve spent too much time practicing when he should have been out living life. According to Keith's philosophy, real music came from experience and pain, not from endless hours spent perfecting scales in isolation. Industry insiders reported that Keith even declined to do interviews for guitar magazines that featured Steve on the cover. The rejection was both personal and philosophical, reflecting Keith's deep disagreement with what Steve represented in guitar culture. Joe Satriani, another instrumental guitar virtuoso, allegedly faced similar criticism from Keith. Keith reportedly couldn't understand why anyone would want to listen to guitar albums without vocals, viewing Joe's entire career as pointless showing off. Sources claim that Keith said Joe's instrumental records were made for guitar nerds, not for real people who wanted to connect with music on an emotional level. Keith allegedly believed that removing vocals eliminated the human storytelling element that made rock music powerful and worth listening to repeatedly. The story goes that Keith was once invited to an all-star guitar event honoring instrumental players. He supposedly declined immediately, saying he only respected guitarists who served songs instead of serving their own egos. Keith allegedly told interviewers that Joe represented the worst kind of self-indulgence in guitar culture. According to sources, Keith viewed instrumental guitar albums as practice tapes that had accidentally been released to the public. Industry insiders reported that Keith made jokes about instrumental guitar music, calling it surf music without the surfing. This mockery was allegedly aimed specifically at guitarists like Joe Satriani. Even Slash from Guns N' Roses, who clearly drew inspiration from Keith's image and playing style, allegedly didn't escape criticism. Keith reportedly thought Slash was all costume and attitude, without genuine outlaw credentials or authentic rock and roll spirit. Keith supposedly called Slash a kid playing dress-up, pretending to be Keith Richards. Sources claim that Keith resented how Slash copied his look and style, but lacked the genuine life experience that made Keith's playing authentic and powerful.
There's a story about Keith and Slash meeting at a Los Angeles recording studio. Witnesses claim that Keith refused to even acknowledge Slash's presence, later telling others that real outlaws don't wear costumes for publicity photos and magazine covers. Keith allegedly believed that Slash's blues rock was derivative and unoriginal. Sources said Keith told friends that Slash stole from better players without adding anything new or personal to the language of rock guitar. According to industry insiders, Keith turned down multiple opportunities to collaborate with Slash, making his disrespect obvious and intentional. Perhaps more surprisingly, Keith allegedly had serious issues with Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. This conflict reportedly centered on blues authenticity and proper credit to influences. Keith allegedly believed that Page borrowed heavily from black blues musicians without giving them proper credit or showing respect for the tradition they created. Sources claim Keith called Page a talented thief who built his reputation on other people's ideas. Keith allegedly said that Page took riffs from Willie Dixon and licks from Robert Johnson, then claimed them as original Led Zeppelin compositions without proper acknowledgement. According to rumors, Keith actually confronted Page about songwriting credits at an industry party. Insiders claim Keith told Page directly that real blues players honored their influences instead of pretending they had invented everything themselves. Keith allegedly resented how critics referred to Page as a guitar god. Sources said Keith believed that Page's technical ability couldn't make up for his lack of originality and his disrespect toward the black musicians who created the blues tradition. This rivalry reportedly lasted for decades, with Keith making pointed comments about borrowed riffs whenever Led Zeppelin came up in conversation. Even more shocking is the alleged tension between Keith and Eric Clapton. Despite both being British blues enthusiasts, Keith reportedly has serious problems with Clapton's approach to the music. This rivalry was supposedly about authenticity and who truly understood the blues tradition. Keith allegedly believed that Clapton took the blues too seriously and turned it into something academic and stiff. Sources claim Keith said that Clapton's overly respectful approach sucked the fun and danger out of blues music, making it boring and lifeless instead of exciting and raw. Stories suggest that Keith and Clapton competed for the same session work in London during the 1960s. Industry insiders claim Keith resented losing opportunities to Clapton, who was considered the more respectable and reliable choice by producers. Keith allegedly mocked Clapton's constant changes in guitar tone and his obsession with signature model guitars. Sources said Keith told friends that real players only needed one beat-up guitar, not entire collections of expensive instruments. Despite occasional shows of public respect between them, Keith supposedly harbored resentment toward Clapton's guitar god status throughout both of their careers. Jimi Hendrix, widely considered one of the greatest guitarists who ever lived, also allegedly drew mixed feelings from Keith. While Keith reportedly respected Jimi's natural talent, he hated how Jimi influenced rock guitar to become focused on effects pedals and feedback instead of pure playing ability. Sources claim Keith said that Jimi started a harmful trend by making guitarists think they needed expensive equipment instead of developing good technique. Keith allegedly believed that Jimi's legacy was destructive because it made guitarists prioritize technology over musicianship and feeling. There's a rumor that Keith attended Woodstock but left before Jimi's famous performance. Witnesses claim Keith told his bandmates he couldn't watch guitar playing turn into circus entertainment with burning instruments and playing guitar with teeth. Keith allegedly told interviewers that Jimi was naturally brilliant but chose spectacle over substance. Sources said Keith believed Jimi could have been the greatest guitarist ever if he had focused on clean playing instead of amplifier destruction. Industry insiders reported that Keith blamed Jimi for creating generations of imitators who became obsessed with gear rather than developing their own voice on the instrument. Ritchie Blackmore from Deep Purple allegedly earned Keith contempt for bringing classical music influences into rock. Keith reportedly despised Ritchie's approach and thought that combining Bach with rock was pretentious nonsense that betrayed rock and roll's working-class roots. Sources claim Keith said that Ritchie's neoclassical approach made guitar playing inaccessible to regular people who just wanted good riffs they could enjoy. Rumors suggest that Keith refused to play at festivals where Ritchie's band Rainbow was performing. Insiders claim Keith told promoters he wouldn't share stages with guitarists who dressed like medieval wizards and played arpeggios instead of straight-ahead rock and roll. This represented another example of Keith's fundamental belief that rock music should be accessible, direct, and rooted in working-class culture rather than trying to impress people with sophistication or classical training. Finally, Jeff Beck allegedly represented Keith Richards' deepest and most significant guitarist rivalry. Sources claim the tension stemmed from completely opposite approaches to the instrument and fundamental disagreements about what guitar should accomplish in rock music. Keith reportedly resented how critics always praised Jeff Beck as the guitarist, while treating Keith as just a rhythm player who kept the beat. Keith allegedly told friends that Jeff's technical perfection was cold and emotionless compared to his own raw feeling and authentic approach. There's a legendary story about Keith and Jeff having a serious argument backstage at a British music festival in the 1960s. Witnesses claim Keith told Jeff that all the technique in the world doesn't equal one genuine blues lick played with real feeling. Sources said Keith believed Jeff represented everything pretentious about guitar culture. Keith allegedly told interviewers that Jeff played for other musicians instead of playing for regular audiences, which made his music elitist and disconnected from rock music's roots in working-class culture. Keith supposedly said that Jeff's constant style changes proved he lacked a true identity as a guitarist. Industry insiders reported that Keith made jokes about guitarists who never found their sound whenever Jeff Beck's name came up in conversations. This fundamental disagreement about the guitarist's purpose and what made great playing allegedly made Jeff Beck the guitarist Keith clashed with most throughout his career.
Looking at all these alleged rivalries together, a clear pattern emerges about Keith Richards' philosophy of guitar playing and rock music. Keith believed in simplicity, authenticity, and emotional honesty above all else. He valued feeling over technical display, soul over speed, and songs over solos. He thought guitar playing should serve the music rather than showcase the guitarist. He believed in honoring influences, respecting the blues tradition, and keeping rock and roll accessible to regular people rather than turning it into something academic or elitist. Whether all these stories and allegations are completely true or partly exaggerated over the years, they reveal something important about Keith Richards' place in rock music history. He stood for a particular vision of what rock and roll should be, and he never compromised on those principles. His alleged feuds and rivalries weren't just personal conflicts. They represented deeper disagreements about the direction of rock music and guitar playing, about whether technical virtuosity or emotional authenticity mattered more, and about whether rock should remain true to its working-class blues roots or evolve into something more complex and sophisticated. Keith Richards created his own legacy through decades of iconic riffs and memorable songs with the Rolling Stones. His influence on rock guitar is undeniable, even if his approach differed dramatically from many other legendary players. His unfiltered opinions and alleged conflicts with other guitarists reveal a man who cared deeply about the music he loved and refused to stay silent when he thought it was heading in the wrong direction.